Hi, my name is Marie Hein. I'm sitting here with Isabella, who's a newcomer designer, and this is the third Berliner Salon talk. Maybe before we start with the interview, a little bit about you, because you're a brand new designer. So you are Danish-French. You grew up between Strasbourg and Brussels. And you studied at Central St. Martin's, graduated in 2018. Afterwards, you moved with a little stint in Paris. You moved to Berlin, where you live nowadays. Before you started your eponymous label, you worked for numerous fashion houses like Kenzo, Jill Zander, or Courage, which you call some of your heroes. You launched your label in no other year than 2020, which was, I think, quite a special year for all of us. And every single design is made by hand in an environmentally and socially responsible manner, which is, of course, great. Our looks have a greater cause to bring optimism and comfort into the world. The New York Times just featured you as one of the upcoming designers, and your looks from the first collection are already in store in London in 2 stores. So this is really great. And we also want to check you out online. Your online store is launching in February, which is amazing. So welcome, and it's great that you're here today.
Thank you.
To launch a label during a pandemic is a quite courageous step, I would say. Of course, it takes a lot of courage to launch your label, or launch a label anyways. But during a pandemic needs probably even more. So how many people called you crazy?
It's definitely a really difficult time to launch a label. It's quite difficult for small brands to survive in this kind of time. I definitely had a lot of questions about why it had to be exactly now, but it was a project that was on the way for a long time, and I had started working on the idea and decided I wanted to do it before the pandemic really hit. And then it slowly creeped in on us, and we didn't really know how bad it was going to be, and so I just stuck through with it. I just decided to keep going anyway.
What motivated you to keep on going?
Well, I mean, I think this idea of wanting to do a brand was always something I wanted to do. So it was more that, like, how bad could it get for me to not want to do it? It was more that way around. And yeah, I was just super excited to work on my own project, to make my own designs. And I mean, it's such a privilege to be able to do it. So I think it's more that I'm finding the strength to do it anyway.
We're coming from a world of endless opportunities, kind of, at least. And then your label was born into a world of limitations, I can say, because I mean, everything has changed and we're glued to our homes. So, and how far would you say did these limitations influence your design and maybe also work process?
Well, I think when you're starting a label, when you're a young brand, you always have limitations, whether it's financial limitations or limitations in terms of materials or exposure. You're always limited. So in some ways, this was an added-on challenge, but I thought, you know, if you have a lot of challenges, you might well take one more on.
So that wasn't a big problem.
No, I mean, I was ready for it, starting it. So
definitely.
In some ways, it was just one more thing to take into consideration. But everything is also new to me. I had to learn so many skills, and I had to, like, I don't know, learn how to do my fan lenses and all of this. So it's just like another thing that I just need to deal with.
What were the biggest changes you had to make during the design process?
Well, there were quite a few. First, I met a shoe factory in March, and I had an interview with an intern in early April. And at that point, we knew that there was a pandemic coming, but we were still able to move around and fly and all of this. It was a bit more of a joke. And then the week after I met my intern, we realized it was a lockdown, so I had to do everything via Zoom. So that was definitely a bit difficult, because when you're in a design process, there's a lot of physical procedures, like you have to make samples and touch materials to see how they feel. So all of that I was kind of left to do by myself. So that was a little bit difficult, and everything just slowed down. Also, the whole process was just really slow. And I think sometimes in fashion, you like to have this pressure and to move things forward quite quickly. So it was a bit more of a slow pace. I had to watch my budget quite a lot because it was very clear that I would have to last a bit longer on a small budget. So I focused on some pieces and that kind of conveyed my aesthetic best. Yeah.
To create, as you just mentioned, to create a label only online or via Zoom, it is probably a big challenge. I mean, you created a collection, but wasn't that like a huge challenge for you to be only online, to visualize everything digitally at some point?
Sure. I mean, I was doing samples at home and playing around with things, but of course, you know, normal research process, you go out and you go to shops and you find garments that inspire you, you go to libraries, all of that was definitely just, you know, I was stuck to looking in my old research books, which was also great, but it's, you know, you can't do that forever.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, and then also in terms of launching the collection, I think there was an advantage in the sense that that I could do it digitally, which is cheaper, but it was hard to organize a photo shoot. It was hard, like, for me to reach out to shops because they've never ever seen my clothes, so they have no idea what the quality is like or how it feels. So yeah, it was definitely a bit of a different procedure.
It sounds like that. When you look at just for a moment, when you look at the whole industry, basically everything has changed. Like the whole industry is digital now. So we're going from amazing orchestrated, imposant shows to digital showcases, which is completely different. Like the approach, of course, completely changed. What would you say are the positive side effects of it, or?
Well,
missing also.
Yeah, I think it levels out the playing field for all designers. Everybody is kind of forced to work, or everybody's got the same space that they can show in. So in that sense, I think it makes it maybe a bit easier for smaller brands to take part in fashion weeks. I mean, a lot of smaller brands were able to do it, whereas normally it's quite expensive, so they can't take part. But with the video, it's more accessible. But I think any way that shows can be a little bit tricky because a normal customer will never go to the show. Yeah. So in that sense, everything's already digital. But I think it's, of course, a shame that you can't go and see garments in real life. Yeah. I think they're meant to live in the real world. Yeah. So there's definitely an element that's lost. Yeah, and also
if you have the music and the staging,
it's a performance.
Yeah,
and I think, of course, every brand can have different approaches, and I don't think all brands need to do shows. I think it's quite nice that some brands are able to just be digital if that suits them. But I think it's a shame that we're forced to do it all in one way.
Yeah, definitely. But do you think it was time for a change like that?
I think it was already on the way. I think there were a lot of questions that the fashion industry was asking itself about sustainability, about the speed in which things are produced, about the amount of collections that come out per year. And I think that the pandemic is just speeding things up. So you can see it with some bigger brands that were able to like pause, whereas normally they would be in such a hurry to like continue. So I think it kind of maybe also gave an opportunity for things to change a bit faster, which is good.
Definitely. When you go back to maybe your own label, sustainability is a huge factor for you. And basically everything that you're creating is made by hand, and your clothes are made in Berlin by Berlin-based factories by hand. And you're working with upcycled materials or recycled materials like polyester, and at least everything's got certified. So finding the fabrics, as you just said, that not only meet your standards, but maybe also fit your ideas, is pretty difficult when everything is closed. So, and also no fairs are going on or anything like that. So which new ways did you find to find these fabrics?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, as a small brand, it is difficult to find materials because you're met with huge minimums. You have to buy hundreds of meters of materials. So that's difficult. Sustainability was definitely important to me when I started my brand. I had a blank slate, so I thought it made sense to implement all of this from the beginning. But it's also quite a jungle to navigate all these different certifications and different, sustainability labels. So all of that was a little bit, I had to educate myself and figure out how to do it. And I don't think there's one way, but I think the design is important, and then you work on materials that work for it. But so partly I started looking online, and it was kind of interesting because a lot of these small startups that are working on sustainable materials, as opposed to bigger, older mills that are very established, were also having their online shops because they are also creating their platform. So I was able to buy smaller quantities, which was really good. So it kind of went hand in hand. And then I also looked on eBay, started sourcing some bed sheets. So yeah, I spent quite a lot of time on the internet looking for stuff.
I guess.
But yeah.
Instead of being outside and finding inspiration.
Yeah.
You're quite an expert on bed sheets now.
Yeah.
What is so great about vintage bed sheets? Maybe for the audience, you created a pair of pants which are made out of upcycled, basically, or no, original bed sheets.
Yeah, it's bed sheets, and then I guess it becomes upcycled. But I'm not even sure exactly how I started looking at it, but I really like damask fabric, which is like a woven material. So you have a pattern on it, and so I was looking for that, I think more as a pattern inspiration. And then I kind of found this niche of German bed sheets from like the 60s and 70s, and they all have like these patterns that I'm anyway quite interested in. So it was quite fun to try and make pieces that are all each unique also. And luckily the factory I worked with was willing to work in this way also, which is not a given also.
True.
So that was nice.
When you talk about the 60s and 70s, they're basically, you circle around them in your collections. You did your Spring Summer 21, which is out right now, or is coming out right now. You're working on Fall Winter already. But when you look at it, it doesn't really reflect the pandemic, let's say. It's more like, I'd say, an optimistic counter movement, as it's you work with radiant colors, with scalloped collars, and with go-go booties, and everything is actually quite fun. And you are a big fan of this era. What would you say is, or what do you love about this era the most?
Well, I think it's the optimism that go with the clothes. It's like the fact that it's not so serious. I'm a big fan of Courrèges, and so I kind of look at him as a big inspiration. I think like that era was looking at the future and envisioning the future in a positive way, and women were a bit maybe more light-hearted. At least that's how they were pictured, and so I'm quite interested in that approach. I think it's refreshing and it's funny because it's the past envisioning a future, and I'm looking at that past to still envision the future. So I don't know, it's a little bit goes together somehow.
And how far does the past fit into the present at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't think anything is necessarily completely new anymore. I think so as I said, that way that the 60s was kind of visualizing the future is still kind of probably how we see the future, or at least that's how we associate it. So I think, in the pandemic, I wanted to create something positive. I had to, when you're designing for a future season. So I feel like if you're trying to think about what you want the future to look like, shouldn't it be positive? Shouldn't it be fun? And I know it's a tricky time, but I also think that fashion is an escape, and it's a fantasy, and I think we need to create the fantasy that we want to see. Well, at least that's how I approach it.
Yeah, and it sounds about right, especially I think in the times where we are right now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and the collection is quite joyous, it is quite fun. How much fun can fashion be at the moment, or maybe how much fun should fashion be at the moment?
Yeah, I think it's tricky, obviously. Like we're all sitting at home and we don't really have occasions to go out to dress up to. I'm very happy to be able to wear something out for once. But I mean, a lot of us still are home with our family or with some friends in a flat share, so shouldn't we dress for them? Or nothing stops us from dressing to the supermarket. I mean, we can still go there. So yeah, I mean, I think it's important that we keep a positive mind at the moment. Otherwise, it's just going to get too gloomy and we're going to get these extremes that maybe aren't that healthy either.
So yeah. Dress up at home and dress in something fun.
Yeah, to the
I mean, it helps,
supermarket.
yeah, because on one hand, I mean, fashion can keep you sane, probably.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
You love to play with, I mean, you said yourself that you want to bring optimism into the world, and you're playing with so many cute, fun, and odd details also. You also designed a pair of glasses which are basically not wearable because they look more like a surreal art print. How do you keep yourself, how do you secure playfulness maybe in this world which is a very difficult place right now? Yeah,
I think it's a little bit like exercising. You just have to keep it up and you just have to make sure that you do it. But yeah, I think it's more about like forcing yourself to play around and not to succumb to the darkness, if that makes sense.
No, it does.
But yeah.
But when you, no, please.
Yeah, I mean, I like to play with odd details and to use objects that are recognizable and to change them around. And I think those glasses are interesting. I mean, it's more of a starting point, and nothing stops them from actually in the future maybe becoming a real product in real glasses. They look a bit crazy, but I think it's nice to have some subtle things that are kind of changing your perspective a little bit from how things should look like.
Also, when you look at your on your coat, we have the stripes, and they're like.
Yeah, it's so it's a lot about like engineering prints and warping the print to kind of fit around the garment. I think on even the belt buckle is having it. So it was a lot about like using this print to create like an optical illusion. So yeah, I like this idea of double take and seeing things, and then you think you know, but it's slightly different.
Definitely. Can fashion help us not to take everything so serious?
I think it definitely can. It can be an escape. I don't necessarily think it always should be. I think it depends on the designer. Every approach is different, and I think clothes have many different functions, and that's okay. But I think it's why not make it a good escape for everyone?
So. When you look at the whole industry at the moment, so of course the fashion industry was hit quite hard during the pandemic. I mean, from suppliers to designers to retailers, basically everything shut down more or less. So the world slowed down. And as you just mentioned, we're all glued to our homes, and occasion dressing or buying something to go to the office or to go to a great dinner party or anything became completely obsolete. So in how far would you say does this change our understanding of fashion?
Yeah, I'm not sure we're quite at a point yet where the way we approach clothes is completely changing. I think there might be room for some products that weren't so important before that are gaining more importance now, but at least for me, in approaching clothes, there are a lot of white t-shirts and a lot of jeans out there, and so I think as a designer, you want to bring something to the table and you want to create something that has meaning and that is adding to everything.
But then how far would you say, like, I mean, it is kind of a new lifestyle we live in at the moment. Will this affect your future designs maybe?
I think not yet, at least. Anyway, I like to work on something that's very visual, so if anything, that might be interesting for a digital world. But no, I mean, I think of course, most of the time we're just seeing each other's heads, but then maybe
earrings.
Yeah, earrings, or maybe I just need to continue making some interesting colors or something. But no, I'm not planning on directly changing my approach. I think we're seeing that this is dragging on much longer than we thought. But I also think we will get back to a moment where we'll want to go out to occasions, and so I'm hoping that by the time I'm in a few seasons that I can continue working how I've been doing.
So fashion is also some kind of hope.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, get the dress and go out there maybe in a year.
Exactly, yeah, definitely.
As mentioned, the whole industry, of course, suffered under the pandemic, but it needed also a re-evaluation of the status quo. I think, I mean, people are being more reflective now, they're questioning their lifestyles more, and while the world kind of slows down, the focuses, they do shift. So change, I think, or a crisis like that, it is always change, and change also means opportunity sometimes. Do you think that this is the wake-up call the industry was waiting for, or the industry needed?
I think it was on the way. So I think it was a bit more of an opportunity to change things. I mean, for me as a small brand, it was a starting point anyway. So I'm just learning to work in this environment. But I think for bigger brands, it was an opportunity to pause and to think about their approach in a different way, and they were kind of allowed to do it without it seeming like a big shift in that sense, because they had to. So in that sense, I think it was good, and I think as consumers, we're also more aware that we don't need so much stuff. I mean, obviously, we're not going out at the moment, so we don't need as many things. But I think it was a trend that was on the way, considering what you buy, how it's been made, what are the conditions in which it's been made. And I think that when people are going to invest, then they're going to think about that a little bit more. Of course, not everybody, but I think it's part of a trend that's on the way.
Definitely. And I mean, also, you also said it kind of, it's also about sustainability.
Yeah.
Like what greater possibilities do we have through the crisis, maybe?
Sure. I mean, it's about sustainability on one hand, but I think that's such a broad term. But I think it's about making less collections, more important pieces that are more interesting. That's one key component, because once the clothes are interesting, you don't throw them out, or you make sure to resell them. But I think in terms of sustainability, sure, as a small brand, you get to decide. It's much easier to control the whole process, and I think that shift is on the way. Yeah.
Yeah, and also if you look at big brands, from inventory problems and I mean, overstock can be maybe at least sized down.
Yeah, I mean, it is a really big challenge, even for a brand of my size, to create small minimums, because factories have a certain quantity that they want you to produce, and otherwise it also brings the price up a lot, which also as a small brand sometimes is challenging, because people don't know you yet, so they're a bit worried about spending a lot of money, but you're making something very special and something that isn't produced so many times, so it's also kind of unique in that sense. But it's difficult to meet that, and I think there's definitely in the future room for that to become easier to deal with.
So there is definitely potential also regarding pre-ordering, maybe then?
Pre-ordering, yeah, and that has definitely also become much more important. I mean, all my pieces at the moment are only available for pre-order, just because there are some timing parts involved in that, and it also means that you know exactly how much you're making. So that's also a really good tool, actually, but of course it requires people to be a bit more patient, but hopefully they will be.
Definitely. So the last question is, what kind of potential do you see, like, overall in the crisis, or maybe something you wish for afterwards, or what you wish for the future, for the fashion business, for the industry? Where do you see the biggest potential?
I think it's a difficult question, but I think definitely the fact that a lot of brands are kind of all a bit more on the same level at the moment is a really big plus. And I think it's of course it's super hard for small brands at the moment, but there are some positives. And I think looking forward, I'm definitely hoping that products will be better, that we're better at tracing how our materials are made, because even for a small brand like me, and I ask all the mills, okay, where's this fiber from and all of that, and you don't always get an exact answer. So I'm really hoping that traceability will become better. It's everybody in the industry needs to be involved in it, but it's something that's still really difficult. There's still a lot of components in clothes that are hard to find. Like I was looking for a shoulder pad that was not possible to find in a sustainable way. So I'm hoping that mills and manufacturers will create more options and be better at saying where everything comes from. But it also comes from us as designers and as consumers to ask for it. So it's really important. But I'm really hoping that there will be more room for that in the future.
So if we work together, then we can make it
I think so, definitely. It's a group effort.
It is definitely. Great. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me.